Everyone, welcome to What Just Happened. I'm Christine Russo. Today we welcome Sean Tucker, brand and marketing expert. Welcome, Sean. It's a conversation about branding.
Yes.
Would love your expert opinion with your background in On Running and Nike and Converse. You clearly have that high branding background. Tell us a little bit about that.
I've worked in a number of different capacities. For the largest portion of my career within marketing, my job is to create enduring connections between consumers and brands. I spent a lot of my time working in Nike proper, Nike Inc. and Converse, and most recently in On. So definitely over-index in the sportswear space, but also with some brands who really look to make long-term impact and connection with their consumers. And they have actually very clear identities of who they are as a brand and how they want to show up in the world and how they serve the communities that they connect with. And that's been a great experience.
I love how you summarize by saying your mission, your job has been to create enduring connections between consumer and brand. I find the word enduring to be so intriguing in a time where we're in easy trigger cancellation or major distraction. Creating something enduring is more challenging than ever. I like to think of it as being you're in the house of Nike, you're in the house of Converse, and you're a super fan. And so that's that enduring connection. But then underneath, there's churn of content and position and different ways to communicate and engage. That's the way I see it. That's not really what's happening in practice, because something will happen and they'll say, that's it, we're done.
We're in a very interesting, a dynamic media environment and a dynamic brand environment. At its core, if you understand who you are as a brand, the executions, the content, the activations that you do should all align. And over time, there's your core. Nike's core hasn't changed that much over the last 20 years. When I say their core, it means who they are and their mission and how they represent themselves to the consumer. How that's expressed has to evolve over time, and it has to really take into account different behaviors and reading the air of media behavior, media consumption, retail, politics, economics, and a number of other things that are affecting the audience that they now serve. But at the center of it is your brand's core intact. And I think that sets the brands apart who do create enduring and lasting impressions and relationships with their consumers versus those who kind of day trade. And I think a lot of modern brands are day trading.
That was such a good way to put it. Wow.
I feel in some ways I read some of these recent headlines and I don't think there was malice or malicious. I think sometimes we can get caught up in the cycle of things, right? Chasing the trends, or if we pull this lever, we know we're going to get instant gratification or satisfaction or result. And I see that happening, and brands are just doing things, but they're not really thinking about the long-term intent.
Bear with me. I'm going to try to frame this. So I'm going to start with the end point, which is if something out of the norm for a brand is done. I would say the Sydney Sweeney ad is out of the norm for American Eagle Outfitters. They were like, let's go big or go home. It has to be done perfectly. At the end of the day, it really wasn't done perfectly. It was a copycat ad taken in what I can see. Let me reframe it. So you've got two back-to-back blockbuster drops by Calvin Klein with Jeremy Allen White and Bad Bunny, and they just really blew everyone away. They were what they were, and they fit in to the Calvin Klein hyper-sexualized, hyper-sensual, their brand since forever, since the 90s. So that was very on brand, but it was done, and it was done very well. So I've seen the comparison. So now you're sitting and you're a denim brand and you want to be like, I want that. I want that. I want that big splash too. So maybe it's possible they looked at that blueprint and even looked further in the Calvin Klein annals and said, remember what they did with Brooke Shields? There's a lot of this chatter online. Let's see if we can modernize that and bring it and have it be our own. Which brings me to my point, which is that's just lazy and it's not very good. The Brooke Shields one was actually quite controversial at the time because of the nothing comes between me and my Calvins. And it was like, oh my God, clutch the pearls. She doesn't have any undergarments on. What? She's 15, whatever. Let's leave that part aside. But if that's your blueprint, if you're really looking through the glass and you want to be with the cool kids, that's never going to work. Copycat creative, it dilutes every iteration. And I just think it just fell victim to that. That's my personal opinion. What are your thoughts?
I agree. And I would add that it wasn't genuine. You brought up a really great point. Calvin Klein, and they've had some challenges over the years, but what's enduring is they've always been subversive. They've always been edgy, controversial. So actually, there's a closer parallel to the Bad Bunny and the Brooke Shields internally, and it's really the same brand core is still largely intact. Now, their expressions and the ambassadors and influencers that they use obviously will change with the times based on who's relevant to the youth of today and the audience that they serve. But it's still in alignment with Calvin Klein. With American Eagle, they don't have a history of being irreverent or subversive. So yes, it did. I think I do judge the ad based on the creative output, and I think it's copy and paste. But at the same time, it's just the essence of being controversial, subversive isn't aligned with who they are.
I have a follow up. So I totally agree. It's not in line with everything they've done and the brand essence, equity, just the history. But okay, so maybe the decision was to change it. And here's an example.
Yeah.
Hannah Montana, Miley Cyrus. She basically blew up her entire persona very dramatically, very robustly, and said, that's it, no more. This is me now. Take it or leave it, like it or not. And she went full guns. A lot of controversy. Was it appropriate? The twerking on TV? Oh no, clutching of the pearls. There was a lot of what's happening, and then a digestion, and then a full-on respect and follow. Lean into her own talents, her unapologetic point of view on this is me now. So take it or leave it. A little bit in the school of thought of a Madonna blueprint roadmap, but let's not digress because that was a little different. But Miley basically said, we're closing that chapter and we're doing this now.
Mhm.
So that could be what this is. But there was a lack of messaging that this is going to be like, are you this now? Or are you going to go back to non-celebrity, non-sensual, sexualized? Like, what comes after this?
Exactly. Exactly. I would love to have been a fly or to be a fly on the wall. I'm sure there's even more conversations going on now. Is if AE is trying to reinvent itself, one, is that the case? And if they are, what is it going to become? I still don't know if this is, and I'm not judging it morally or ethically. I just don't know if this was the right first entry. And if this was their intent to reposition themselves, rebrand themselves, to your point, I don't think it came across clear that's what it is. I guess it's all up to their next few moves will make all the difference.
But there haven't been any moves. If you have a reaction like that, like where are the moves across social channels, across
Yeah.
all the different, I think it was a one little bit of an old school approach, which was here's a campaign, come shop. But
Yep.
we don't operate like that anymore.
And they were successful in launching an outrage marketing campaign, which really is divisive, and it creates a conversation around a topic that is polarizing or divisive. And they've been successful at doing that. Now, I don't know if the intended outcome aligns with exactly with what they wanted, or if they thought through the ramifications of what could potentially happen.
We shall see. I would have expected maybe two more other campaigns with different people and a different script and a follow-up, and it's someone else or maybe a man, and it's genes determine my eyes are brown, my jeans are blue. Jeans, my eyes are green, my jeans are blue.
Yeah, exactly. That could have made it one still very controversial, but had a much broader spectrum of people that were in the campaign and also who it eventually resonated with. I'd say it may have been 2 degrees away from being something that was actually pretty good and could have reached a broad swath of consumers, but still had that shock value. And it just missed the mark. It just missed the mark. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that they went this route. I don't think it was with malice necessarily. I just feel that it just wasn't really well thought through, and also it's chasing short-term gains. And that's kind of the modern media environment. I think the brands that really, again, I always go back to that word endure, are the ones that can navigate and Understand, comprehend the levers you pull and when you pull them, navigate that space, and also have a more long-term view. And going back to that first piece, understanding is understanding who you are as a brand and your values and your core, but then also understanding and being able to read the air of public sentiment. I just don't know if I think about all that's going on in the world, all that's happening in the US, turn the controversy dial to 100. They basically went from 0 to 100.
I wanted to ask you where, and maybe this is a segue, but you've worked, so in the athlete, sport, what do you call that industry? Sport, footwear, sport performance, footwear.
Sportswear generally, and then it gets into within some brands are more footwear focused, but they're all footwear. It's the core, but sportswear. We'll call it the sportswear industry.
So how do you, when you're in a high brand environment like the ones that you've been in, how do you balance being culturally aware and trend driven? What's the difference? Are they both important?
If you think about brands like Nike, and again, I worked for Nike for over 12 years. Nike's having some challenging times right now, but they're still doing pretty fine. That's a legacy brand in this era of brands. They're one of the most successful brands of all times. There's a very clear identity of who Nike is, what it does, how it performs, who it serves, how do you communicate with them, how do you show up in that space. A lot of the expressions you think about it, through ambassador, influencer, it's very deliberate and intentional who a Nike works with. They're not always the same, but they're shared values. Even going with someone who's more controversial, there is still some underlying thread or a connective thread between the brand and that partner. And that's very important. It's not just, hey, that person's really popular, so let's bring them into our brand, because we know that if we launch a campaign today, in 2 weeks' time, we'll grow brand awareness by 10% or so on or whatever. Again, that's very short term. Brands like Nike, brands like Converse have a longer term view, whereas yes, they're going to help us grow brand awareness, but they also align with who we are at our core as a brand. And we'll connect with new audiences through the partnership with them. And yes, we'll get headlines, but we're going to do it in a way that one is lasting. And then also, to be honest, in 10 years from now, someone can look back and say that was an iconic campaign. The Brooke Shields campaign with Calvin, again, not judging it morally, ethically, or whatever, it's an iconic campaign. The fact that it became the reference for this modern case that we're talking about proves it. And I don't know that in 10 years' time, maybe even 5 years' time, anyone will look back and say, hey, the Sydney Sweeney AE campaign, groundbreaking, outside of creating a short-term buzz. But going back to your question, it really has to do with, both are important, but you have to nail the core first. You have to really understand who you are. And that's why I think about brands like a Nike, like Apple, like Coca-Cola. Even I was really, in recent marketing and brand news, I was really impressed by what both Starbucks, and this is more a CPG and food space, with both what Starbucks and McDonald's are doing, right? McDonald's took this turn going back to McDonald's land, moving away from like the celebrity trays, and which they were doing over years. And they focused on nostalgia and their history. And I think it's an appropriate time to do that, because in that nostalgia, and a time when people are dealing with reality that is in a way fantastic, not in a good way, but has this element of fantasy and surrealistic properties to it, they need an escape. And right, and that nostalgia of McDonald's land and the characters, that really serves that need. And I feel like they're really spot on right now with reading the air and understanding the consumers and what they need. And then on the other side of that, I think about Starbucks. They went back to, again, their core. And it's a really bold move they made in cutting back on mobile, right? So the mobile pickups, you order through the app, you go to a place, you pick up your drink, you don't talk to anyone, and you leave. And so much of Starbucks core was about community and connection in this third space and connecting with the baristas. And they want to get back to that. So they're going to actually, in the short term, they're actually probably going to take a little bit of a financial hit and create some discomfort, but to think about how their brand connects and resonates with consumers on the long term, and really going back to it and making that decision. They had to understand, hey, this is who we are. Maybe we've deviated from this. We need to get back to it, because that's what differentiates us. That's what makes us unique. And what makes you stand out is coffee's coffee to a large extent. There's good coffee in a lot of places. What about your brand makes me want to go there every day or buy from you and spend my money there? If I really love your brand, I will go to that space.
That's the enduring connection that you mentioned. We covered a lot. I think we covered, without direct questioning, a lot of celebrity usage, culture versus trend. Let me ask this as a final question because I love your thoughts. In today's crowded landscape, what are the non-negotiables for building a brand ecosystem that can scale without losing its edge or identity?
Community. And it's really creating a community around your values, a community around the products and services that you offer. And in a lot of ways, they're driving your brand. A brand, as a brand or a business, you don't own your reputation, especially in the modern context of a brand. Your audiences drive it, and communities and brands who have really strong communities. I think about the space that I come from, sportswear, running most recently with On. The communities really drive and fuel that brand's growth. And because especially if you're serving them with the right product, with the right experiences, with the right services, they take ownership, they take equity in your brand, and they become many people are paid ambassadors or influencers, but then others become ambassadors by default because they believe in your mission and your vision so much. And I feel, again, every brand won't have this, and there are some anomalies that fall outside of this, but largely, I'd say community is a really big part of it. And it even goes, this part of the conversation ties back to the celebrity ambassador piece. One last thing I'll say on celebrity ambassadors, I think celebrity, that upper echelon, that top 0.001% celebrity endorsement, that does work. It's short. It has, how I say, broad reach and broad awareness, but it's actually down the funnel and into the micro, the nanos, and the communities that drive adoption of your brand and ultimately your product.
I just want to add that community is, you're absolutely right, but then there's like lazy community and then there's passionate community. The running community is a very passionate community because there's technology involved, and sink or swim, fail or not, you can succeed based on the technology as well as the ambiance of the community. I think also, for example, horse community, very passionate. I think that, and beauty has a lot of very passionate communities. And so you're right in the sense that people become their own self-appointed ambassadors because they're so into it that they tell their friends, et cetera, and so on. And I do a lot of work with independent global brands that want to come here. And I always tell them that the way to grow is by having people tell their friends about that. Word of mouth is still incredibly powerful. You can call it community for enterprise, but really it's just word of mouth. So where'd you get that?
It goes back to the fundamentals. That's why we started, and we were talking about the modern context of marketing. The fundamentals don't change. Word of mouth is still the strongest form of marketing. And I think it's taken on new expressions and new interpretations in a modern media and marketing environment, but word of mouth. And then you have that compound effect. Seth Godin talks more about you don't need a million followers. You just need your core 100 that support you without question. And then because they're the compound effect, right? They're your core 100, and they'll continue to spread it and to other people, but they're the ones who will buy you day in and day out. They're just not like sometimes consumers, customers, community. They're the real advocates that believe in you. And even if I think about in theory, one of the most successful brands of all times, which I'll say is Apple, it really started with this, and I was one of them. I'm embarrassed about how many, I keep all my old Apple devices, and I need to get rid of them actually. But I have every phone from the original phone. I still have it, doesn't work. I probably have quite a few laptops that don't work, desktops. But it was so much around, and I don't think everyone really talked about Apple and community, but it was about the product, but it was about this idea of belonging. Again, my background is both marketing and started my career in design. And at the time, Apple was it imbued freedom, creativity, being different, right? Think different. That was it. And so it was a sense of belonging. And the people who I associated with and were affiliated with, whether in college or earlier in my career, our connection point was that we believed in that mission. And it wasn't about the latest, whether it was an Intel or M4 chip. This is our badge. This is who we are. This is what we connect to. We align with their values. We align with Apple's values, but we also, as peers, we're aligned. And that's why we're creating this, even if it wasn't a community officially, there is some kind of that connection.
It's so pure. It just takes me back to a time where, so there were two ads that were very famous for the two different topics you brought up. One was this Breck shampoo commercial from the 70s, which was we told two friends, you told two friends, and then the
Yep.
image multiplies on it. So that's that word of mouth effect. You tell two friends, you tell two friends, you tell two.
Yeah.
So that is true still to this day, so many years later. And then, of course, the Apple, oh gosh, those days of being an Apple person and feeling both elite and like special and defined as it's okay to be a rebel. And then the commercial of the sort of guy in the sweatshirt versus the guy in the suit.
Oh yeah, exactly.
You identified with the guy and the things he said. He didn't
Mhm.
say, okay, boomer, but it basically was like that type of
Yeah.
energy. And you're like, these are my people. We're smart, we're funny, we
Mhm.
are going to create things and we're creative. And that was a real badge. Maybe still is, but less, I don't know. But that
That's
was,
I think yeah.
yeah, everyone's creative now.
Yeah. And I think also Apple was due, and they're still obviously tremendously successful, but in terms of brand, they're due for not a full pivot, but I think they do have to they have some innovation things to figure out. I say that to say I think Apple it's ripe for a bit of a shift, right? How are you talking to this next generation and still being that everyone's creative? And I don't think they're going to pivot or deviate from being creative, but what does that mean? What differentiates you from the rest of the crowd now when so many so many brands have taken their playbook and pulled from their playbook?
Very true. It'll be about personal assistance through AI. And if they do it the Apple way, the best. They don't have to be the first, but it'll be the best.
So that's they've been getting a lot of criticism for not being the first in AI, but they've never been the first, right? They weren't the first. They didn't even invent the MP3 player. SanDisk did, but the SanDisk MP3 player wasn't sexy. And they also weren't able to market it. Apple and Nike are marketing companies. Most people don't realize that they're marketing companies first and foremost. They just happen to sell products. And they sell products really well, but they're marketing companies. Most people, when SanDisk was making the MP3 player, didn't even know what an MP3 player was. It was too abstract and technical. Apple said 1,000 songs in your pocket. Oh, I get it. And then they built the ecosystem, the infrastructure around it to support distribution of music. And they just made it seamless and easy to own an MP3 player. And actually, it became an object of desire. I still have all my iPods too.
One of the criticisms right now of Tim Cook, who's grown the stock wise, there really is no criticism,
No, not at all.
but he's an operations person versus a product person, and they're in a product pivot.
Yeah.
But they're not really in a product pivot. They became a services company, and they're not in a services pivot. They're really in an innovation pivot. What does that look like? What does that look like for Apple? We'll see.
Yes, there needs to be some groundbreaking innovation.
Very good. I want to thank you for your time. This was really great. I feel like we could keep going.
I always love talking about brands and marketing. There's so much more to talk about, so many exciting things going on. The cycle is just so fast now.
And that is what just happened. I'm Christine Russo.